everybody. It's Lizzie with Elizabeth Couch Photography, and I'm joined by Morgan with Southern Enchantments. And today, this is part of my series of vlogs related to the COVID-19 pandemic that we're experiencing. And so we want to talk about a couple of things that are affecting couples that have weddings planned for the immediate future, whether it's May, June, those months, but then also how that could affect them in the future while they pick like new dates if they decided to postpone. We are going to talk about canceling versus postponing. And in addition, we want to talk about those couples that are planning, not necessarily for like right now, but more so for the end of the year and maybe next year, and how everything that's happening now can affect their planning. And yeah, so we're just going to dive into it. And thank you, Morgan, for helping me with all this and joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's talk first about people affected now. I think the big thing is, and I've seen this all over like Facebook and like Instagram and stuff, people are, obviously we're all freaking out, but when you already have your event, especially if it's set for this month or next, like, should couples consider canceling or postponing? What's your take on that?
I don't think anyone should cancel. I definitely think people should postpone. Cancellation is totally different than postponing, because if you cancel, a lot of times you won't get your retainer back. So you can lose out on a lot of money. Rather, if you postpone, a lot of vendors are working really digital, what's the word? I just lost it.
Virtually.
Diligently, just to be able to make sure that they're rescheduling everyone and applying their retainer to a new date. Versus if you cancel, you can't guarantee that you're going to get that retainer back. And obviously with some venues and things like that, it's 50% of the overall cost. So, if you have a $10,000 venue and you're paying 50% down, you're going to lose out on $5,000, which is a lot of money. So,
yeah, and so it's such a difficult time, like, for everybody, because no one could have predicted this, and I it's like playing devil's advocate and going on both sides, but couples might think like, well, it's not my fault, give me my money, kind of thing,
right?
Give me money back. But then at the end of the day, also, like, businesses, they're also losing, because a lot of people, this is how they make their livelihood. And so it's not that they're greedy or anything, it's just that they're trying to either protect their employees or put food on the table. And so that's at least in my contract, that's why I put it, I use the word retainer, which implies it's non-refundable.
Right.
And it's for those reasons, just because like we lose money because we have to maintain websites, maintain equipment, pay employees if it's a business that has an employee.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's real tough, because it's like no one's fault, and you kind of have to
you have to have a lot of grace and a lot of patience and understanding that it's not just you that it's affected. It's affecting literally every aspect of business, and a lot of people are having to reschedule. So you made a good point about they can't just give the retainer back. They would go out of business really quickly, and regardless of what the circumstances were, even if it wasn't due to coronavirus, they wouldn't refund that retainer. Specifically, not so much with like venues and things like that, but photography, for instance, like if you've already put in work, you've already done an engagement session and things like that, you've already put in that work, or even planners and things like that. So you're not going to refund that, because you've already done work for them. And you do deserve to get paid for that, regardless of whether or not you can't do the actual wedding whenever they postpone it. But the thing is a lot of people are coming together to really help each other out, to, support one another in the case that, let's say, you were already booked for another date, and that's the date that that your bride and groom decided to choose. So there's a lot of people coming together to try to help each other out in this time, because it's difficult. Nobody's ever been through something like this. So we're all trying to work together to do the best that we possibly can. So I strongly suggest trying to use, kindness and grace whenever talking to vendors, because they're going through really stressful times just as you are as well. But at the end of the day, we're all in this together, and we'll figure it out, and we'll still try to help you have the best day that you possibly can, regardless of all this craziness going on.
Yeah, a lot of us, a lot of people hurting financially and emotionally, and vendors too. Like vendors are people too, and most often than not, a vendor is going to do whatever it takes to make sure that you're happy and to make sure that you get what you need. And so I think I I think we can all figure it out. We just have to be patient and or patient and flexible. That's in that blog post that I wrote earlier this week. Those were my keywords, like just
Mhm.
being patient and being flexible. And if you know me, like that patience is not one of my strong points, but that's all we can do. And it's weird to like not be able to control something. I'm
Mhm.
one of those people, and I'm very transparent, and I'm a control freak. That's why I'm a photographer, because I like to be able to like
Yeah.
just control and fix what I can. But with this, it's impossible. And so instead
Right.
of like dwelling on that, we need to like figure out how we can all move forward and help those that need it, and just kind of go from there. Um, the other thing, if and so I guess we both agree that we're strong proponents of postponing again instead of canceling.
Absolutely.
And so if you do decide to postpone, picking another date is I guess, the immediate next step.
Yep.
And so earlier, before we started recording, we talked about how it's kind of uncertain still, and then how a lot of prime dates are kind of already taken. So
Yeah.
if you want to talk a little bit about that, like the points that you brought up.
Yeah, there's, like we were talking about, it's difficult because especially fall is a really popular time to get married. So a lot of people are moving their spring, summer weddings into the fall. So they are very limited, especially if it's a venue that's really popular. You are most likely going to have to do like a Friday or Sunday wedding. So you're not going to get that Saturday wedding. And some people aren't even giving that an option because they would lose out on, money that they would normally get from booking that Saturday wedding. Because some venues or even other vendors also offer discounts or some sort of discount for doing a Friday or Sunday wedding as well. So, it is really difficult because we just don't know what's going to happen. So this could blow over in the next few months, or we could be dealing with this until the beginning of next year. I'm the most helpful as possible. I think that we should be able to get through this in the next couple of months, but there is a lot of uncertainty on that. So like you were saying, the first thing is obviously to look at new dates. What I would do is, just talk to your closest friends and family just to get a gauge on their availability as well. Obviously, at the end of the day, you have to choose whatever date is best for you and what you and your partner want. But still, obviously, if your parents or somebody else has an obligation on a specific date, you're not going to choose that wedding date. But not even just that, making sure that your vendors are available as well. A lot of vendors, especially photographers and videographers and things like that, where there's only one of them, they book up a lot more quickly. So you have to be diligent in finding a new date and then really communicating between, your family and the vendors to make sure that they're available on that date. But the most important thing is figuring out what their policies are if they are not available. So if you end up choosing a date where they're already booked, what happens then? And honestly, that's just going to depend on whatever different vendor. Everyone has different policies. So you're just going to have a conversation and see, what your alternative is going to be in that case.
Yeah, and it's difficult, especially for people. I feel like I feel right now so much for people that do they're part of the wedding industry full time,
Mm-hmm.
because when you do it full time, I feel like you market a lot harder, you book a lot more because you're on it.
Yeah.
So if they were really hustling and doing really well, and say they booked all of September, October, November, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're booked, but then these March, April, Mays get postponed, and so those dates aren't available anymore. They have to they already lost on that, and they're going to have to put those people in
Mm-hmm.
other dates that they could have booked to keep their income coming. So
Right.
it's kind of like a mess. It's just like
It is. And
it's just so
everyone
hard.
everyone's doing it a little bit differently. You know, a lot of people are very understanding of that this is nobody's fault. So they're being more flexible, like you had mentioned. Flexibility is super important. So they're allowing you to move your date as long as it's within a year. And they're not going to add an additional charge unless, you know, all of a sudden you decide to like want to do new engagement photos because they're not matching like the theme of your wedding anymore. Or if you're originally getting married in spring, now you're getting married in winter, and now your whole design changed. Obviously that's going to come at additional cost because they've already put in that work to plan towards that. So it's difficult, and like everyone's doing something a little bit differently. Some people are charging fees, other people are choosing not to. But at the end of the day, you know, there's just only so much that you can do, and every vendor has to kind of decide for themselves whatever is best for them and their business. Because like you said, a lot of people, this is their sole income. So this is how they're feeding their families and feeding themselves. So, you know, they're trying to help as much as they can, but they also have to be a little bit selfish too, in the regard that they have to protect themselves as well. So
Yeah, it's very, very difficult. And I think, at least for me, and I rescheduled my May couple. I only take one or two clients a month because I think like my practice, I'm trying to keep it more like boutique, kind of like very specific.
right.
It's sort of like my clients interview me, but I interview them, and then it's kind of like a thing like that. And so that
Mhm.
has allowed me to be a lot more flexible, because now, even though I would like to keep, you know, one client a month, I could potentially shoot two or three
Mhm.
in another month, just because, you know, my model allows me to do so that way. It's not my ideal condition, but at the same time, this is just kind of unprecedented, and so I'm willing to do that. And like you said, the whole being able to give couples like a certain time frame,
Mhm.
that's something that I've seen a lot. So yeah, it'll depend on your vendors, but more often than not, they'll do whatever it takes to kind of
Absolutely.
continue with you. The other thing, and you touched on it briefly earlier, was planning or having to replan seasonal aspects if you do
Right.
decide to push it back to a different season in the year.
Mhm. Yeah, so that's difficult because especially if you have like a planner, let's say you did full service, for example, you know, they've been there and they've been helping you pick out your florals and your theme, and your colors and things like that. Now, you know, that blush color that you picked for your May, June wedding, if you're getting married in January, you might decide that you wanted to pick like a darker, more rich color, like an emerald or a blue. So in that regard, you might end up wanting to change some of your theme, or maybe the flowers that you had absolutely loved are no longer in season, so you're having to pick something else. So in that replanning, you know, people are going to have to charge additional fees because they've already put that work in to make your day what you were dreaming. But now you're going back and you're having to change everything. So it's really difficult. You know, some people are just going to copy and paste, and whatever they had already planned, they're going to do the same thing no matter what time of the year it is. But other people, you know, are more particular and want to really, you know, attune their theme and things like that to the seasons. So it's really a couple by couple basis. Um, so it just depends.
Yeah, that's difficult. And for like in our case, when we got married, like I knew I wanted corals and blushes, but those don't naturally happen in October. And
No.
so that's when I made the decision. I'm like, well, I'm gonna have to do silk florals. And so that's what I did. And so there are ways around it, and it's just something that you have to talk to your vendors about, you know, and you
Right.
can still kind of follow the original plan that you had. You just kind of have to find the little loopholes and ways to kind of make it
Right.
happen. But that's
Minor
really
modifications.
important.
I think nowadays
um,
too, people are kind of, sorry to cut you off there.
no, no,
People are like kind of going away from specific colors in specific months. Like I'll still see blushes in January or December. So some people now, you know, they love that color and they want that time of year. So they're like, I don't care if it's not like a traditional theme. They're still going for it regardless. So like I
yeah.
was saying earlier, it's really just personal preference.
And I bet, like, and I don't know, I'm not a botanist or anything, but I bet if you want a certain kind of flower, mean, they probably have greenhouses somewhere weird where like, I
Right.
don't know, like across the street.
Yeah, they're
Like you
probably
can
like
like,
double the price, but if
yeah,
that's
but
what
I
you
mean, if
really
that's what you
want,
want, that's what
then
you want. Yeah,
right.
it's like when I say somewhere weird, I mean like it's like some like little old lady in her house just like dying flowers and shit. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it's gonna cost you, and you have to be prepared to do that. Another thing I didn't really mention in my like written blog, because I didn't want to be a bummer, but I feel like it's something to like be aware of is you're probably gonna have to compromise a little bit. You
Mhm.
may not be able to get everything exactly the way you planned, but like that's what's really happening right now. And so, compromise is
Yeah.
another big word, but I didn't say it because I didn't want to bum people out.
Right.
But
I mean, but the important thing is you do have to be realistic. I think the best thing that you can possibly do is setting realistic expectations. Because if you don't, then they're going to be, even more disappointed than they might already be. But honestly, just regardless of wedding planning, compromise is a big part of life in general. It's part of relationships, and I'm not a parent, but it's part of parenting and in any regard in your life. So, this is definitely an unfortunate thing, but I'm a true believer that everything happens the way that it should. So, no matter what the situation, it's going to end up working itself out. And you know what? It might even be even better than you were originally anticipating. So,
yeah.
just kind of have to, I guess, be as positive about the situation as you can be, but again, being willing to compromise or even sacrifice some things due to this as well.
Yeah, I guess those are the key words, patience, flexibility, and compromise.
Mhm.
So for this like next portion, and I don't know yet, but I may cut it into two different videos because longer videos tend to drag. But the the next portion that I wanted to talk to you about today is for couples that want to start their planning for either the end of the year or for next year. Like, where do you even start? Because like a lot of the things we talked about in the video that we did months ago was pick your venue first, kind of, and then your venue will determine like your date. But
Right.
now you can't go see venues, and so what kind of tips do you have for people? Like, where do they start in this new normal?
Yeah, that's a good question. And honestly, I know it's super uncertain right now, but I wouldn't let that stop you from still planning the wedding of your dreams. If you still have the means to do so, and a lot of people have been affected by this in regards to like their positions or their jobs and things like that. But if you still have the ability to go ahead and to book things, I would highly recommend it. Obviously, there's some things you're not going to be able to do, like catering tastings and things like that. But luckily with technology nowadays, we have a lot of means to be able to get around the traditional way of meeting each other. So I know a lot of venues are starting like virtual tours and things like that. So you're able to FaceTime or utilize Zoom or any other video conferencing service and, do a virtual tour. And while that's obviously not ideal, one thing that you also have to keep in mind is these brides that are having to postpone are going to start taking up some of those other days too, whether it's in 2020 or even in 2021. So there's a good chance that you can still lose out on your first choice because other people are also having to move their date back. So that's one thing to definitely keep in mind and not to stress anyone out. But I think that's realistically something that you have to keep in the back of your mind as you're navigating all of this.
And then we talked about should people like hold off until this is all like done, or should they go ahead and start planning?
I don't think that anyone should hold off, to be totally honest. And, other people might have a different opinion, and that's totally fine. My thing is you can't stop your own life from happening because of this. And, worst case, you do end up having to postpone. But again, so many people are willing to help you and navigate that position. So things are very unpredictable, right? It could clear up in the next few months. It could drag on longer than that. But the thing is what if it doesn't drag on longer? and now you waited, and now you have to wait even longer to get married, or you're not getting those vendors that you originally wanted because you did decide to wait. I know it's scary and it's definitely on an easy time, but I think people need to have some hope too, and really just continually plan and, have fun doing so as much as they possibly can.
I think I totally agree with that. And I think it's better to the earlier you start planning, the more time it gives you to come up with contingencies. I'm a firm believer in plan A through Z.
Yeah.
And and maybe this is like my upbringing in news or marketing or whatever. It's not that I'm a pessimist necessarily, but I like to be like in charge, and I like to know, okay, if this fails, what are we gonna do next? If
Right.
this fails, so like for my wedding, I keep like it's the only people that I know, but we didn't know it was gonna rain, so we had like different plans, and then we
Hmm.
had a plan for everything. Like, what if the DJ, like, if something doesn't like, if something happens, I had a playlist, and sure enough, like something happened to my DJ's equipment that day. Like we had a playlist ready to
You were
go.
foreshadowing.
Yeah, no, yeah, like, I
A
mean, and
little
maybe it
psychic
came
energy.
true. Maybe it came true because of that, but like, so, but we were ready. So like, I knew that when he said my computer just went to where, I said, oh, that's okay. Just go fix it. So he went and fixed it, and I knew that if he didn't make it back or whatever, we had a plan. And so
Right.
that's kind of how I feel about like this whole thing happening. Like you start now, you're able to develop all these plans in case something happens. So that way, like if you have a certain day that you want, but it's already taken, you have a plan B, and then you have like different kinds of plans. And so I think it's the more time you have, the better. And it's not like, I'm not saying, start planning now and start, like impending doom or whatever. No, it's just like that way you kind of have a plan if something does go wrong, or if we do
Right.
have to keep postponing and pushing back and
Right.
all of that.
Absolutely.
Um, so we talked about the planning, the starting now. Another thing that kind of goes along the theme of A through Z is checking with your vendors about the different policies and amendments regarding having to cancel or having to postpone.
Mhm.
Like, if you want to talk a little bit about that, what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone has a little bit of a different plan and whatever makes the most sense for them in their own business. So the most important thing is just to have an open line of communication and really ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Some good questions to ask would be, in the event that we do end up postponing our date and you're not available, what happens then? Do you refund us the retainer, or do you give us a portion of the retainer back? Do you find a different alternative or somebody else that can work in their place? If so, who are some of those people that would be able to, work in your place? Other really good questions to ask would be, what are some of your open dates? Give them like a time frame. I would talk to your venue first to get some dates that they're available, but then just asking, what dates out of these dates would you be available? Maybe all of them, maybe one or two, maybe none of them. So just having an open conversation and having different options and plans is definitely going to be really important. So really all I can suggest is just having conversations, asking them what their amendment clauses are. A lot of people have implemented, new rules. Maybe they let you postpone once, and after that they charge a fee. Maybe there's no fees no matter how many times you change it, as long as they're available for the date. I know in my case, I'll keep pushing it back as long as I'm available. If I'm not, then I'm going to assign one of my other assistant or lead planners to take on your wedding instead. So you really just have to have a conversation and find out whatever, it is that works best for them. But just asking questions, we're all in this together, and you could probably figure out a solution amongst each other to see whatever would be best for, anyone and all parties involved. But one thing I would recommend is making sure that they do have an amendment clause, and getting it in writing. So if you do postpone your date, making sure that everything is in writing, and it's very clear exactly what's going on, if there's going to be any charges, and that everything's up front and that you both agree on them. And again, it's all documented. It'll save some stress and some headaches, down the road if you do that.
Yeah, a lot of people contracts in already had a clause called, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but it's like force majeure. And it
Mm-hmm.
basically talks of what people refer to as acts of God, terrorism,
Yeah.
illnesses, things like that, things you can't control. I don't necessarily like the term acts of God because, what is that,
Right.
things
I
you
don't think anyone really knows.
can, okay, so, it's, we're not going to go into that, but yeah, like, so,
Right.
religious philosophy talks
No,
with
no, 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 not
and,
at all.
and
But
no, I'm just kidding. And no, so it's difficult, but that's kind of what it's what you would find it under in a lot of contracts, but then now a lot
people
of people,
arguing that's not covered by that.
yeah, and so it's crazy. And so I would suggest that you take a look at those, at that clause.
Hmm.
So you'll find it under force majeure or, like I said, acts of God, and then see what's covered. And then the other thing that maybe in that clause or maybe a separate piece is the cancellation and postponements, because more often than not, it'll be very specific what falls under what. And at least for my contract, I had the force majeure thing, but then I added for the future
Hmm.
just a very very specific outlining cancellation and postponement. I did have a cancellation and postponement, but more for like if the wedding was like called off or something like that. But now I added a specific item that says in case there's like a pandemic, an epidemic,
Right.
because there's different like levels of it, an act of terrorism, things like that, things that like no one can
Can
or
predict.
have foreseen. So just make sure that you are aware of those clauses. Um, and then this brings me, like you said, it reminded me of insurance. Like there's a big debate whether or not what's happening right now falls under the force majeure and
Mhm.
acts of God. And so that brings me to like insurance, because there's a big debate there as well.
Yeah, it's definitely difficult. So I am a member of a few organizations here in the Dallas area, specifically for wedding planners, and some that are more just vendor specific, vendor generic, I guess you could say. And I had the privilege of being able to talk to some of them and also hearing from a lawyer's point of view in regards to what's going on. And everyone's going to interpret it a little bit differently, so it's really could just vary. But what we found is that there is no insurance policy that covers something like this. Um, and the reason being, and I don't want to scare anyone, is because insurance is made for one-off events. It's made for the person that gets injured and can't make their wedding anymore. Somebody's an active or on reserves, and then they have to go off, in the war, whatever it might be, tornadoes or hurricanes and things of that nature. That is a very geographical location. So it's only affecting a specific population versus Corona is affecting every single person in the entire world. And if that were the case, insurance companies would not exist and they'd go broke. So from
Yeah.
what we've seen, there is not any that cover it. And regardless, there might be some hidden out there that do, but they're very thin, or they're not outlined very clearly. So it's really up to a judge to determine what is covered and what is not. But to be honest, no insurance policy is going to write coronavirus into a policy now that it's already happened. If you had in your policy before something of this nature to happen, then you're absolutely covered. But now they're not going to write it into there because it's already come about.
It's
So
a
it'd
free.
just be like trying to get coverage, for tornado damage or hail damage after it already happened. They're not going to write a policy for that.
Yeah, it's like
And
a
this is
pre-existing condition, kind of.
exactly this is the same exact thing. So it's difficult because I get the question all the time. I've had several brides and like, hey, should I get insurance? And I have to have that difficult conversation. I'm like, I have several friends actually that are in the insurance industry. I have several friends that are attorneys, and I've talked to both of them, even on a personal level. They said it's not going to cover that, unfortunately. But regardless, I still always recommend getting liability and cancellation insurance. Those are the two number ones insurance policies that you can get in regards to events, because you never know what's going to happen. So it's better to pay, I want to say it averages around like $150 maybe. Getting that just in the case that you or your loved one or, a family member gets ill and you have to postpone or even cancel. So I still highly recommend getting it. but unfortunately it's not going to cover the things that are going on. And if you do find one, let me know. Because I'd be very curious to see that. But
yeah,
yeah.
no, that's something that is very difficult. I didn't even for a person who has plans A through Z for everything, that's not something that we thought of
No,
until like the month.
nobody has thought of, and nobody took
Yeah,
this
no,
very seriously at first either.
yeah, and no, and just in general, like we didn't buy an insurance policy, and now I look back and I'm like why did we do that?
What could have gone wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, like the most, yeah, and so yeah, no, I think it's like you said, it's something that is definitely a must learn from my mistakes. Thankfully nothing happened to us, and hopefully nothing will happen to you. And but it's you're buying peace of mind. That's all it is.
That's what insurance does for anything, for your house, for your car, you know, honestly, anything. It's a peace of mind. And knowing that you have another backup plan in the event that something does go wrong.
Yeah, it's like the
So,
ultimate backup.
yeah.
And then the other thing that I've seen affecting brides currently that could also affect, and I say brides and grooms that are being affected now, but it could also affect couples moving forward,
Mhm.
is buying their attire, because a lot
Mhm.
of this stuff made in China, and we know that they're suffering as well.
Yeah.
And then a lot of that is considered a non-essential business, and so what what should people do, or how would you what is your advice for them, I guess?
Yeah, I've seen that quite a bit. I've had several brides that were actually supposed to get married in May, and this was probably mid-March that they started, working on their postponement plan, and they did end up postponing. But some of them hadn't received their bridesmaids' dresses, or the tuxes weren't going to come in time. And the reason, like you said, is because most of them are made in China, or pieces of them are made in China. So it's definitely caused delays. If anything, I would just be proactive and order even sooner, and read through their policies online. A lot of people have been getting them from online stores, whether it's David's Bridal or Azazi, or there's a ton of online retailers out there now, especially since we can't go into stores and try on dresses for quite a while. So just read their policies, see what their lead time is. Most people are very honest and upfront about what their lead times are. A lot of them are affected by between 4 to 8 weeks longer than they normally are. So just definitely take a look at that and just be proactive in ordering those things. But another thing to keep in mind is alterations, because alterations are also being put on hold, and there's going to be a huge backup by the time
Yeah.
that everything gets done. So they might have to incur, rush fees and things of that nature. So you just have to really be proactive in thinking about alterations as well. Because that's going to be a whole nother struggle that people find, because it's not just bridal gowns, it's bridesmaids dresses that needs to be altered. Maybe it's, you got a custom tuxedo that needs to be pulled in, or, sleeves shortened, or whatever it might be. It's going to affect a lot of different things. So that's another thing to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, it's nuts, because they're gonna have to catch up on the work that they weren't allowed to do when we all shut down.
Yeah.
And then they're gonna have to do that, and then they're gonna have to take care of the new orders and things that are coming in, and so it's just all this work, and man, it's gonna be tough. But yeah, it's just the more time the better. I know when we bought our stuff, we ordered in February, we got maybe like 2 months in, and it was in like June or July when I finally got alterations done, because it just sat there.
Yeah.
And so it takes a little bit. Any other like things that you would suggest people that are starting their planning for the future, for their wedding? And I don't know if I have any other advice to give, but you have maybe more topics that you wanted to cover.
I think we've covered a really good majority at this point. So many people have already done research or thought about postponement plans and things like that. But the best advice to you would just be to take a few breaths and just remember that everything is going to be okay. You know, I know it's stressful now. It's very uncertain time, and that's worrisome to any person, whether you're a bride or, you know, somebody that has a health condition or just an anxious person in general. I think it's definitely an uneasy time no matter who you are. So my best advice is just to take one day at a time and just know that everything is going to happen the way it's supposed to. And you know, everyone's trying their best and is doing their best to get through this together. And, you know, one thing that I can say is it's really made everyone come together. And I've absolutely loved seeing the community that it's created through all of this. And I hope that it stays that way even long after all of this, you know, dies down. But just take a few deep breaths, you know, do some exercises, read your favorite book, drink some, you know, your favorite cocktail or beverage of choice, and just try to relax and just know that everything's going to be okay in the long run. I know it's easier said than done, but if you've hired great vendors, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that you have the most perfect day that you possibly can.
Yeah, and you know, with all this, take some time to research your vendors. I would say hold Zoom or Teams or Skype or FaceTime meetings with them. That way, if you're, you know, if you're assembling what I call your A team, you really get to know them, and then you'll know their personalities, and then that way you can gauge whether or not if something does happen again, or you know, if we have to keep pushing back things, they'll be on your side. Just really take a time to get to know them and interview them to see if they're fit for you. The other thing is that if you do have already a team of vendors and for some reason they're not able to make your new date, the wedding community, I feel like here in DFW, is so supportive and helpful for everybody. And so they, this is one of the points I've made in my other blog post, was just reach out to your vendors and don't be embarrassed or afraid to ask them for referrals.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that, you know, I'm a photographer, and I know other photographers that I would, you know, hire for myself or recommend to others in case I'm not available, or even if I am available. But hey,
like we almost made the full video without her making her debut, but she had to.
No, it's fine. She's part of the team. But yeah, so like just make sure you ask your vendors for recommendations, or you know, and it doesn't have to be specific. So like if you ask me, I have a bunch of, you know, floral people that I would prefer or whatever, and so we're a resource for you. We're here to help you with that. And then yeah, just kind of taking it easy and making sure that you research your vendors. And yeah, at the end of the day, I think we end up becoming more than vendors. We become friends with these people, and so you know we'll do what we can. But yeah, that pretty much covers this blog. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in. And if you want to tell everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me online at www.southernenchantments.com or on Instagram at southernenchantments or southern-enchantments.
And you know me, I'm at Elizabeth Couch Photo on Instagram and Facebook, and elizabethcouch.com. And until next time, stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, guys.